Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Confessions of a Gaming Mum. So today I just wanted to do a little video basically to talk about, because I don't know if people notice, you might have noticed, those that have got eagle eyes, or you might not have noticed. Most of you probably haven't noticed, but I've got a new setup. Yay! I was able to get a new camera, which is fantastic because it has a little flip-up screen, so it means I can actually see my face when I'm filming. I mean, I don't really want to be looking at my own face, but at least it can see when it's recording. I don't have to keep checking the camera all the time to see if it is definitely recording or anything. Doesn't seem like I think it's got quite a decent mic on it, so I don't actually have to set up a mic, which means it's a lot easier for me to edit as well. So it means I can get the editing done quicker, like different things like that. So yeah, it's a godsend having this new camera. I still love my old camera. I mean, I've had that years, but and it's still really good quality camera. But this one is just a lot more helpful and a lot more easier for me to record with for the channel. But anyway, yeah, so the reason I actually was able to get the camera, because obviously with me not working and relying just on my husband's wages, it was kind of like a pipe dream sort of thing, like being able to get a new camera. The person who I have to thank for being able to get the camera is actually my nan, my mum's mum, who died in February. So basically she didn't have any well, as far as I was concerned, she didn't have anything to her name. She died in a home for dementia, care home for dementia, after being there a number of years. But yeah, it seemed that she actually left us, or she'd left behind a little bit of money, which obviously was able to help pay for her funeral and things like that, so like for her plot and everything. But she also, what was left was split between her grandchildren. Instantly, as soon as I was given the money, I split half, which I've put into savings for my son, but the other half I used to buy this camera. Because one of the things with my nan is I have so many photos of her when she was younger, like with my granddad and everything. So it just seemed, that whole thing, like it's always that one thing I have of her is the photos. So I have all the memories that they made over the years. So I thought, what better way to sort of honour her with, like, what could I spend the money on other than something that I can make memories with, which is the camera. But I also thought, yeah, I wanted to make this little video just to, like, a little dedication to her, because she was just such an amazing woman. So yeah, my nan was born on the 5th of May 1927, and she was born, well, it was on her birth certificate as Olwen Isabel Isaacs. Her parents were Ethel and Harry Isaacs, who changed their name, their surname, to Reeve. I don't know what year it was, but I know they changed their name because he was a British, I think it was featherweight boxing champion around the time of the First World War, and he had a cousin called Ada, and I think she was Ada Isaacs, but she actually changed her surname to Reeve. It was like her stage name, or I think her dad might have changed his name to Reeve. It was like, yeah, it was like their stage name, because Isaac's obviously a Jewish name, and at the time Jewish names really weren't seen as an appealing thing to have. So in order to make it in show business, they changed their name. And Ada actually made it quite big. I think she became like a star on Broadway in New York eventually. I've actually got her autobiography upstairs. It's really interesting because she talks about the fact that she used to work at the theatre in Whitechapel, because on my mum's side of the family, well, that side is from Whitechapel area, East London. Yeah, and she used to talk about walking home when she was working in the theatre in Whitechapel around the time that Jack the Ripper was prowling the streets. And she was like absolutely terrified, like walking home on her own overnight and things like that. And her dad was actually part of the neighbourhood watch, like looking out for Jack the Ripper, because obviously at the time there was a lot of theories going around that he was actually Jewish. Jack the Ripper was Jewish because of the way he cut up the bodies. They thought he was probably a butcher, and a lot of butchers at the time were Jewish. So in order to prove a point, they set up a Jewish neighbourhood watch, basically saying that not all Jews are bad, not all Jews want to kill people. So they tried to set up this neighbourhood watch to catch him. Yeah, so it was like, I'm digressing. The reason that Harry and Ethel Isaacs changed their surname was because Harry, I think, wanted to be more famous as a boxer, and because Ada had made it so big with her changing her name to Reeve, he decided he was going to change his name to Reeve, so he would have that association being with her. Oh look, I'm Ada Reeve's cousin. Yeah, it's funny because I remember my nan didn't even know that her name had been changed. She'd just always known herself as Reeve, so it must have happened when she was really young. Like I say, she was born in 1927, so God knows when it was changed. But it was like Isaacs was crossed out and Reeve was just written on the birth certificate. It's really funny. Yeah, and like there was this thing that was going around in the family that it was changed before the war, because they thought that Hitler would come over and kill all the Jews, and if you had a Jewish surname then you'd be sent to a concentration camp or whatever. But I'm pretty sure it's just because, like I said, Harry just wanted to have that link to his famous cousin with his boxing career. And I think he did pretty well. I've actually got still some of his winnings. It's really funny. Like I said, because I have all these photos and memorabilia from my nan, I've got like a flyer from one of the boxing matches he did, and actually his winnings. And I think it was like £1 back then, and it's worth like £100 now or something. It's insane. It's really, really mad. But yeah, it's one of the many things I actually got from my nan. And yeah, that was one thing. She just loved telling stories about growing up with Harry as a dad, and he weren't the best dad, to be honest. He was a bit of an arsehole. She was one of, I think it was 11 children. But other than that, she had one brother that died during the war. He was in the Navy, and his boat got torpedoed. And again, that's something else I have from my nan. I have the letters that my great nan Ethel wrote to I think it was the British Red Cross, trying to find out if he'd just sort of washed up on a beach somewhere in Africa or whatever, and she was trying to find him. She was hoping that he just was sort of like an unnamed, like the English Patient. No one actually knew who he was, but unfortunately, yeah, she never saw him again. But yeah, there's just like, I just remember my nan was just so good with the stories. Like like I said, because she was born in the 1920s, she was still quite young when the Second World War hit, and because they were from East London, it meant that they were stuck in the middle of the Blitz when the Blitz happened as well. And while my dad's mum was evacuated, I think she went off to like this Welsh lady's manor house. It was like like she was sent off into the Welsh countryside. My mum's mum refused to go. She would not leave. She didn't want to leave her mum behind, so she stayed in East London while bombs were dropping around the house and everything. And she always says, again, because there were so many children, so they basically lived like hand to mouth sort of thing. They didn't have a lot of money, so it was all hand-me-downs that it was all like been worn by like 3 or 4 of your brothers or sisters before it got to you. So they always had like patchwork clothes and everything. And I think she said she shared a bed with 3 of her sisters, and it was always this thing like if one of you wanted to turn over, you had to tell the other one turn, and then they'd all turn at the same time. And but I do remember one story she said about during the Blitz was they're all lying in bed, and I don't know what, I can never remember what sister it was, but I always remember she said it was one of the most vain ones. It was one of her older sisters who was quite vain, and she was always like spending ages like looking at herself in the mirror and everything. And yeah, they were sharing a bed, and a bomb hit near their house, and it shook the house. Like the house didn't fall down, luckily, but it shook the house quite badly. And something, there was a shelf above the bed, and something, I think it was like a jar or a tin or something, fell off the shelf and landed on her sister's nose, and she had this big bulbous like blood blister on her nose, and she couldn't leave the house for ages because she had this blood blister on her nose. And my nan thought that was hilarious, because where she'd been, she was so vain and like was obsessed with how she looked. But yeah, she was a tough cookie, my nan. Even though, like I said, Harry was an arsehole to the kids and to his wife. Like he beat them quite badly, because I think his leg got shot to pieces. He was like a policeman over in France during the First World War. I think you can actually read up on him. He was actually Ruse, and there was an uprising in a town called Ypres, I think it is, Ypres in France, where he actually shot a man in the back, and I think Harry ended up in prison while he was over in France. Obviously the family didn't know about this. It was only me researching it that I found this stuff out. But yeah, there was an uprising with the soldiers, because these police that were supposed to be just watching out for the men, making sure they didn't sort of breach curfew and different things, and they were kept in line, they were actually really bullying them, especially Harry. So when he shot one of them in the back, obviously that was just like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, and there was a massive uprising, and a lot of men, I think, were executed over it. During the war, I know pretty sure he got his leg shot to pieces or something, like the back of his leg had to be reconstructed, so even though he didn't lose his leg, he couldn't really box again, he wasn't as light on his feet anymore, so he wasn't as good at fighting anymore. So obviously where he wasn't getting the fights in as much, he started drinking, and hence, like my nan always used to say, if you cast a shadow wrong, when you walked into the room that he was sat in, he would literally like just belt you. It was really bad. So yeah, he wasn't a very nice person at all. And again, there was the whole thing of there wasn't a lot of money to go around, and you've got 11, 12 kids that you're trying to feed. And he insisted that he was the one that got fed first, so the kids and his wife would get the leftovers at the end. And always another story I remember my nan telling me was there was a piece of cheese left over, and her mum had said, "Now don't you eat that cheese because that's for Dad when he gets home from work." So my nan was like, "Okay, I'll guard the cheese, I'll make sure it's fine." Her older brother John came in from, I think he'd been working or he'd been out doing something, and he came and he was like, "Oh, I'm really hungry, I'll eat that cheese." And my nan was like, "No, you can't eat that cheese because Mum has left that for Dad." And he was like, "I don't care, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat that cheese." So then my nan basically chased her brother around the garden with a kitchen knife to make sure he didn't eat the cheese. Like I said, there's just like, I just have so many stories from her. It's like she was fantastic, hilarious. I think she was like a teenager. They lived next door to a family, and she really fancied one of the brothers, one of the sons in this family, and his name was Sid, but she never really said anything about it. I think he was a couple of years older than her, and she was out skating outside or whatever, just minding her own business, and he came out. I think she said he was in his uniform because he was in the army during the war, and he said, like, "In a few years' time, when you're old enough, I'm going to take you out." And she turned around and she was like, "Yeah, whatever," and just skated off. But really, she was like, "Oh my god." So and she'd always talk about their first date and the fact they went to the cinema, and he bought her like a really big popcorn, but then he tripped over and spilled the popcorn everywhere, and she couldn't stop laughing. Even during the whole film, she couldn't stop laughing, and like, I think he asked her as well, "Why do you find it so funny?" And she actually thought she'd ruined her chances with him. Like, she went home crying to her mum saying, "Oh, he's never going to ask me out again." But obviously he did, and a couple of years later they got married. He was my granddad, basically. The few years that they were married, they had my aunt and my mum. But unfortunately, when my nan was 7 months pregnant with my mum, my granddad was actually involved. He was riding his motorbike home from work, and a car came out of a blind bend or something, and he went over the car and ended up basically being killed. So my nan later ended up having to look after them, like fend for them for herself, on like one wage. But my mum always talks about the fact that they were never short of food in the house. So like they'd have to have like patchwork clothes or everything. Like, they couldn't really afford that sort of stuff, but there was always food because my nan worked in a greengrocer, so there was always fruit, always veg available for them to eat, so they never went hungry. And like, my nan was such a hard worker. Eventually she, I think my mum was about 5, and my nan met a man called Daniel Mansworth, and then a couple of years later they had a son, which is my uncle. And yeah, and like, my mum always talks about how she like her and my uncle used to always fight so much. Like, she hated my uncle growing up because he was such a wind-up, he was such a little shit. Still is, to be fair. But yeah, it's always like funny stories from my family. From like, the first memories I have of my nan was always going to well, I think even when my mum was a teenager, she would run pubs like over in Kent, in London, like all over the place. And like, when mum and dad first started dating, there was one in Kent, I think, that they used to run, and it was like the top floor was completely derelict, like you couldn't go up there, but the rest of it was like really, really old, and it was like really grand sort of inn. And my mum had like a really long galley as her bedroom, and my dad used to always be terrified staying around there because it was just so creepy. And the dogs always used to bark at the bottom of the stairs leading up to the bit that was derelict. My granddad used to hate staying there overnight, so they'd go home like somewhere else because he refused to stay there overnight and things like that. But yeah, that's always the first few memories I have of my nan is pubs and dogs, because she loved her dogs. And she had two staffs. One of the staff, like the staffs, had a big litter of puppies. It was like 10 puppies or something. It was a massive litter. And we had the runt of the litter. A little staffy with like she was white fur, but she had brown ears, so she was kind of like Jack Russell sort of colouring. We named her Tess. But yeah, and like Ollie and Max were my nan's two dogs, and she had a big German Shepherd as well called Rosie. I always remember her. But yeah, I can't even remember. It was a good, because my uncle ran a pub. I can't even, and my nan used to help him run it. But I think I was quite young when she gave up being a landlady. She was a tough old nut, my nan. She really knew how to fight. She knew how to deal with troublesome punters. She's really good, especially because my like Daniel Mansworth, her second husband, was a big bloke as well. So you could just literally just pick people up by the scruff of the neck and just chuck them out. But yeah, that's some of the earliest memories that I have of my nan. I think after that she was like a cleaner for an old lady. So it was like my nan never not worked, so to speak. It was only when she retired, and even then she was, like I said, she was doing she retired from being a pub landlady, and that's when she became a cleaner. So so she was always working. It was I think it was still when she was a pub landlady. Like I said, her second husband, Danny, actually died of leukemia. I think I was around 6 years old. And yeah, it was a really tough time for the family, because obviously he was practically, he was, as far as like my aunt and my mum were concerned, he was their dad. Like, he'd been there through their whole lives, sort of thing. So it was a pretty big thing when he passed. But again, my nan just soldiers on. She was such a tough cookie. And yeah, and it weren't, I don't think it was long after that she actually retired. And like I said, she went on to become a cleaner. And she still lived in East London. It was only in like her later years, she was a bit more dodgy on her feet, that we moved her closer to us, so we could, like, we were there to keep an eye on her and everything. And that's when we noticed the dementia setting in. And yeah, it was a good number of years. It's again, because my nan was she's like so vain. She went on about her sister being vain, but she was so vain. It's like whenever you saw her, there was never a hair out of place. She had this just majestic beehive that she wore. Like, she had a really good friend of hers that did her hair until she had to get someone else to do her hair. You know, she'd always do her hair, and she'd always do it in this perfect little beehive. But then when Kathy couldn't do it anymore, I think that's when my nan had to learn how to do it herself, and much more simpler rather than this majestic beehive that she used to have. But yeah, you'd never see her hair out of place. She'd always have like lovely earrings. She never had her ears pierced. She always just wore clip-on earrings. She always had lovely jewellery, and she always wore lovely clothes. But her house was a tip, but she looked lovely. It was like she was the most disorganised, scatty person you could ever meet. It was like, again, but you'd go around there, she'd make sure you were fed, make sure you had a drink. She'd always give you, like, the kids, a little bit of money if she had anything in her purse. Even when she had the dementia, she'd always like act as if she was going into her purse to try and give you money, because it's just something she always did, because she was just such a kind, generous woman. But yeah, obviously in her later years, when we noticed with the dementia, and obviously then she went into a home, and I think she must have been in the home, I think like 5-6 years or something. It flew by. It really flew by, those years. It makes me sad because my son won't grow up with her being there, and she was such an amazing woman that I think all of our lives, like my mum, my dad, my sister, really all our lives are that much better because she was there. We had her stories. She looked after us when our parents needed her too. Like, you couldn't ask for better than that, and she was lovely. So yeah, it broke her heart when she died, but obviously it meant that she wasn't suffering anymore. And like I said, we weren't expecting anything from her when she passed, because where she was in the home, we basically thought that there wasn't anything for us to have from her. I mean, not that we'd want anything. It's like, oh, we've got all the memories. So, but yeah, so it was a big surprise when, like, my aunt, who was basically looking after all her finances for her, after they paid for the funeral, they actually said there was some money left, so she split it between us, and that's why I'm able to talk to you now on this camera. It's that one little thing that I didn't think I'd get from my nan. So even when she was gone, she was able to, she still wanted to give her something, and I think that's like typical nan. But yeah, we really miss her. But again, we'll always have the amazing memories, and you can bet your life I'll be telling my son all the stories about her and this amazing woman that he only ever got to meet twice before I got myself into too much of a state. So yeah, Nan, this video's for you. Thank you, and we love you and really, really miss you. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Anyway, I hope you liked my my little video reminiscing about my the amazing, wonderful life of my nan, Owen Isaacs. Anyway, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already. I promise not all the videos are like this. I don't cry every time. I only cry in some of them. But yeah, I shall see you all in the next video. Bye.